Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this Rotary Foundation District Grant Training. We appreciate your coming this afternoon. I'm Beth Paget. I'm District Governor this year, and I really appreciate your attendance today. We have confused a number of Rotarians in our district by having the grant training simultaneously in the same week, simultaneously as the virtual foundation celebration. So if you're on here thinking you will hear Stephanie Urchik, our Rotary director from this zone, you're on the wrong meeting. This is a district grant training. It will be great experience. We have a lot of what I call Foundation 101, general information about the foundation this afternoon. So it's worth your time. But tomorrow night, 6 p.m. is when we will have our virtual foundation celebration. Outstanding speaker, Stephanie Urchik, our Rotary director from this zone, who will just give an inspiring and very educational talk. We will also recognize many clubs for their outstanding foundation work last year, and we will have some special presentations. If you have not signed up, you will have an email in your box by the time we're off this meeting, encouraging you to join us tomorrow evening. It's going to be less than an hour. It's going to be a great evening. And so we would really, really like your attendance tomorrow night. So thank you for joining us today. As District Governor-elect, Frank Cox is in charge of this training this afternoon, along with Lorraine Angelino, our District Rotary Foundation Chair. So I appreciate both of those and the work they have done for this. Also helping, Terry Weaver, our District Trainer, Joyce Morin, our District Governor nominee, and of course, Faith Line, our District Administrator. So thank you for joining us. I would like to introduce our first presenter this afternoon, Lorraine Angelino. She was District Governor in 2013-14. She is one of the most passionate people and knowledgeable people about the foundation that I know. Lorraine is our District Rotary Foundation Chair, and next year will be the Regional Rotary Foundation Chair for our entire zone. So Lorraine, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Our Rotary Foundation has its own motto and mission. Our motto is doing good in the world. And our mission is to enable Rotarians to advance world understanding, goodwill, and peace through the improvement of health and the support of education and the alleviation of poverty. And these are, as you will notice, we are going to talk about some of our areas of focus, and some of these areas are mentioned right here in our mission statement. One nice thing about our foundation, it has received some very good awards. The Charity Navigator for 12 years straight. We have won World's Outstanding Foundation, and we've been getting, they rate on a 100-point basis, and we've been getting 100 out of 100 points. We've also gotten the award for top 10 charity changing the world. And the biggest thing is we have careful oversight by Rotarians, and our foundation is over 100 years old. Our organizational structure within the district, we have Beth Paget as our district governor, myself as the District Rotary Foundation Chair. We have an audit committee and our treasurer, Lisa, and then we have Polio Plus with Doug Kaufman, annual giving with District Governor-elect Frank Cox, district grants with Bill Harley, Paul Harris Society is Rita Yarborough, and endowment fund is DGN Joyce Morin, and then our global grants is Ben Ficklin. So there are several different funds within the Rotary Foundation. Annual fund share is our top one, and that's our source for our district grants and global grants. So if you put money into annual fund share, then we will have this, we will get money back to our district that we can use for district grants and for global grants. Polio Plus is designated to polio eradication. And both of these count towards your donor recognition levels, your Paul Harris Fellow +1, those type things. And then we have where you can give to the areas of focus or causes. And those are typically given by non-Rotarians, but they are out there. And then we have the endowment fund, and that is typically you would do become a benefactor or bequest society member through the endowment, or making a very large gift. We had one several years ago for $250,000 to our endowment fund, which allows us to get the interest each year that we can then use some of that interest with our grant funding as well. So next, DG Frank Cox is going to come up and talk to us about the District 7750 grants and the Rotary Foundation.
Thank you, Lorraine. And I'd like to add my thanks to each of you for participating today in this training. I'll be your governor next year after Beth, and I sure look forward to getting to know each and every one of you. And I know a few of you already. And I think you understand that the Rotary Foundation it's our philanthropic organization where we have the opportunity outside our own communities to really make an impact on the world and to build peace and goodwill and really to make an impact around the world. And the foundation really has focused on, for many years, on 6 causes. You can see them here. It's peace, of course, in conflict resolution, and their disease prevention, of course, is polio. Our district's been involved with water projects, quite a few water projects for clean water. One of the goals of the United Nations is to have every person in the world to have clean water by 2050. We're also involved, you can see, in most of the clubs are involved in education and literacy in their communities, but it's a major goal around the world. One of the most interesting things is this past year, the board of directors for Rotary added another cause, another area of focus to support the environment. And I think a lot of us have, our clubs do environmental programs locally, and we know that the environmental needs around the world are many. And so we have the opportunity now to expand our capability in doing goodwill around the world in another area. And I think if you look at kind of how the Rotary Foundation, if you look at it from a humanitarian standpoint, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And at the very, very bottom, it's just the very basics, food, water, shelter, clean health, good health, and so forth. And as you go up the chain, what you want people to do is to have a quality of life like we do around the world, to have confidence, to have jobs, to have self-esteem, and so forth. And the way the foundation works and the way we do is we really give at these lower levels. We really work with those in need around the world. And our outcome and our hope, and it's really paid off around the world in so many ways, the reward we get is to see these people develop and grow. And the way the foundation has focused our causes around this hierarchy of needs is you can see that we have water projects and so forth at the bottom to promote health and disease. We have an environmental program, so they'll have clean water as well. And so it goes up the chain to promoting peace and having programs where people will be self-actualized and they will be good citizens and so forth. They'll be educated, they'll be healthy. And we know that education and health go hand in hand. So we're really working toward that. And the beauty of all this is that when we are involved with the foundation, we have the opportunity to support these and better the world around in our own way and better our own communities. So I think y'all all recognize that one of the things that the foundation has done is to recognize the donors. And I think a lot of you are probably familiar with the donor levels, but the most fundamental donor level, of course, is the Paul Harris Fellow. And the way to become a Paul Harris Fellow is to donate $1,000. You can either make a contribution of $1,000, or over the lifetime of your Rotary participation, it adds up. And I think Lorraine mentioned that the Polio Plus donations, which is not part of the annual fund, it also contributes to your points and your total contributions for Paul Harris. Once you've given 1,000, your next goal would be another 1,000, and the Paul Harris Fellow can go from +1 all the way to +8. And after you become a +8, you generally will go to major donor status, and that's $10,000 a year, either a $10,000 contribution or a lifetime contribution totaling up to $10,000. You cannot, one of the goals of Rotary, and a lot of clubs have it in their due structure, is to be a sustaining member, which is to give $100 a year to the foundation, and you'll be a sustaining member. One of the things you can do is also you can be a $1,000 a year donor and be part of the Paul Harris Society. And we, at one point, we had a big program to increase membership in the Paul Harris Society, and the district has quite a few members. So I encourage you, for those that can, encourage your members that have the capability to be a Paul Harris Society member. I mentioned major donor at 10,000, and Lorraine mentioned that we have a past donor to join the Arch Clump Society, which is a $250,000, $250,000, which is pretty remarkable. And I think she's working on one for this year in our district. So we will have a second Arch Clump Society member. And that's quite a tribute to our district, quite a tribute to the individual to support the foundation. She also mentioned the endowment fund, and in the endowment fund, this money goes to special causes, but it accrues money that they could have used for various emergencies. They've used money out of the endowment this year for COVID and other things. But to be a benefactor, you should pledge $1,000 toward from an estate to the endowment fund. If you want to be a bequest society, you can pledge $10,000 to the endowment fund. And the way to do this is, of course, a lot of people will do it through a life insurance rider. They will use their 401k and make a donation out of that. And some people will donate stock or securities to those. And some people will just leave the bequest money or the benefactor money in their will or trust. But this is an option, and these forms are available in my Rotary for you to use if your members are interested in being a member of the endowment. Now, we know about contributing is we use DAC-DB now, and it's quite simple. It really made simple now. There's a form in DAC-DB that you can go in, and the neat thing about it is you have everybody's name and their Rotary ID, and there's a self-made process. So you're able to do that for the annual fund and for polio. So those of you who are familiar with DAC-DB, and your treasurer, I'm sure, is familiar with DAC-DB, you have a methodology that's quite simple now to send in your contributions or your club's contributions on your either monthly or quarterly, how you do your donations and your collections. Now, we know that the neat things about these funds that we donate to the annual fund, we return them. And these are, we get these grants, and I'm going to talk to you about grants, but these are grants that we initiate. It's our idea, things we want to do, and they come from the club. So each club generally each year will submit a grant for a project or a program that you have passion about. You control it, you know exactly where the money's going, who's the recipients, and so forth. So that's a nice thing about these funds. They are completely controlled by the clubs. And so we'll talk a little bit about the annual fund system. It's on the surface, it's a pretty simple system. We get 50% money of what we contribute basically after 3 years. And we get 50% back to the district, and 50% goes into what is called the World Fund. And out of the World Fund comes the global grants. And the global grant process, Terry will cover that in a few minutes. And about 5% of the total money donated goes to administer this fund around the world. But this is called the share system, the annual fund share system. And I'm sure most of you have heard about that. And this is a kind of a view of the money that we have available this year that was donated through our foundation giving in 2018, 2019, we had almost $500,000. And as that is spread out, you can see that we're able to get back into the district about $250,000 that we could use and so forth. And so we divide those out by the clubs based on their request. And you can see that the money also flows over to the World Fund, and they are used for several things. One is the global grants, which Terry will cover. And the global grants, these start at $30,000 and up. And they also use the World Fund for cash and other things that they might do, as I mentioned, in hurricane relief, tornado relief, COVID, disasters, and other things that money can be used out of that World Fund. And that process is changing pretty dramatically during this pandemic. And we'll learn a little bit more about that. But are there any questions on about district grants? Well, let's talk about them then.
Frank, this
Yes.
is Cara Hamilton. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So I on this annual fund, let me make sure I understand it. So our club will make their contribution to the annual fund. It will go to RI, and then RI will give us our district back our 50% 3 years after, in a 3-year rotation. Is that the way that works?
Yes.
Okay.
But it goes to the foundation, not to RI. They're separately boarded and managed.
Okay, so
Their umbrella, of course,
RI Foundation.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Rotary Foundation, TRF, the Rotary Foundation. But the district grants have been organized so that they are really quite easy and flexible for you to use. We'd like for them to be relatively inexpensive, and they should last a year. And the way it works is we'll give you a grant based on your request. You match the funds, and then you execute, and we'll ask you to execute it by the end of the year. And then we report the results up back to the foundation, and the cycle continues. But you can use that money in your district, in your club, for the projects that you're passionate about. And they vary for everything. And I think many of you are familiar with your projects that your clubs are involved with. Education, a lot of educational, a lot of food programs, and a lot of humanitarians. And Bill Harley will award these annually. We have a grants committee that reviews them and so forth. There's a online methodology to turn it in on Rotary7750.org. There's a form on there, and I'll show you an example. And there's dates. You're going to see this date 3 times during the presentation. The application for your grant for the grant year 2021-22 is due on April the 30th. So make a note of that. If you want a grant for your year, or for the year 2021-22, the application is due to Bill Harley by 30 April. Now, you probably each one of you probably have experience, but when Lance Young was the district governor, his life was saved by a defibrillator. He was working out and went to the ground, and they used the AED and brought him back to life. And when on their way to the hospital, they had to use it again. So he made that his signature project during his year. And many, many clubs did their grant to go out and get a defibrillator and put it in a key location in their community. A lot of clubs have playgrounds and parks, support school grounds and so forth. There's a program called Early Act First Night program at the local school. It's to promote understanding and peace and awareness of good government and so forth. Josh the Otter, a lot of clubs, especially those that are around the big lakes, have this water safety program. It's in elementary school with literacy and also with instruction and so forth. And the zone this year has a big goal of providing 10 million meals, both locally and globally. And so a lot of clubs have used the Rise Against Hunger or local food banks to provide food and so forth. So hunger programs are very important. And a lot of clubs are also doing backpack programs where they either put books or weekend snacks and so forth. So there's a lot of programs around schools and feeding those that are at risk. And so I'll provide you with a copy of a district grant priority list. And basically it tells you what you shouldn't submit, but it's your project and it's your passion and it's your club's desire to do the work. And so fill out a grant application, make sure it's very simple, clear, and get it into Bill by the 30th of April. And the main thing is, let's just say if you ask for a grant of $1,500, we'll give you $1,500 and your club has to match the grant from $1,500 out of your fundraising or for your the way you go about funding your grant. So one of the things that my club did, we have had a big literacy program where we've provided books to several organizations around the community and the elementary schools. And if one of our members goes out and buys $30 or $40 worth of books, they bring the books to our club, to the literacy team, but they also give the receipt to the treasurer, and that receipt counts as dollars spent towards your match. And that's an important part. So if you're spending money, if your members are spending money, that goes toward the matching funds. That's pretty important. And the way the funds are broken out, and I'll show you on the next slide, you have to qualify for the grant. And this is what the qualification looks like. You have to have at least $50 per capita giving to the fund to get 1,000, between 100 and 175 for 2,500 and so forth. And we also, for those that are top 5 giving in per capita clubs, they will possibly get up to an extra $5,000 if they ask for them. And I'll skip one slide. Let me go back. One of the reasons that we may deny your grant, but Bill Harley rarely ever denies a grant. What he will do is he will call your grant coordinator or whoever has submitted the grant request, and he will talk them through the best way to word it or the best way to frame the program. But you can see that we want the program to have maximum impact and involve maximum Rotarians in your club. We don't want you to ask for a grant for $1,000 and turn around and give it to the Sertoma Club for their project. We want you to have your project, what you're wanting to do, what you're trying to gain a little reputation and community awareness and branding of your club for the good that you're doing in your community. That's what it is. And it should be, the intent should be quite clear. And one of the things is the outcome should be within our district. We don't want you to provide funding and support another district. So really I hope this doesn't sound harsh, but really the intent is for you to take your grant money and use it in your community and to the best needs of your community. Now here's a breakout, and I'll send this to you, each of you in an email, and the shows the amount of annual fund contribution, what their club's per capita was, and the maximum grant they were eligible for. And you can see there are a couple of clubs that didn't compete for a grant this past year, but we'll see if you have a need and you have a special request, I encourage you to communicate with Bill Harley. But you'll see what your club is eligible for this year with this email and this breakout of the grant eligibility list. Now, here's some dates again. As you know, we're going to probably start sending out the notifications requesting your grant application sometime in February. And you'll get your folks will get an email from Bill Harley saying time for your next year's grant. But more importantly, he's going to ask you to make sure that you complete this year's project and report in by the 31st of March. And that's the main reason we do that, is we have to report up to the foundation that we have obligated and spent the money and properly accounted for the programs that they were doing. So that's one of Bill Harley's job and Lorraine's job. We have to make sure that the work's been done, the money's been executed, and so forth, and the final report has been submitted. And then while you've finished up your report, the next thing to do is to submit your application, and that is due on the 30th of April. And of course, I said the grant form is on Rotary, 7750, and that's next. And then normally sometime between June we'll get the grant money, and the checks will start arriving in early August. Now there's a key to this. Here's the form that you will use, and I think there's probably, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's a new form being developed. But this form is quite simple to fill out. Fill it out online, print a copy, and then send it in to the Bill Harley with the submit button. There's several pages on it and so forth. I won't go through this because it's very self-explanatory. And I will send you an example. I'll send you a copy of this, and I'll send you an example of a completed form so that you'll have a clear understanding of how to do it. And so the grant requests will, again, get them in by the 30th of April. It's your next president's year, the PE's year. So I'm hoping the PEs are involved with the preparation and the understanding. And make sure you keep it simple and keep a record for yourself for the club. And remember, you're going to get a grant, but don't start spending the grant money until you actually get the money from us. You need to I know you'll get excited in July when it's the new year and you want to get started. So wait till you get your grant money before you start your project. And then you want to do a project report at the end. Those are quite simple. The description of what you did, how the funds were used, maybe a picture or two if it was a playground or a visible project, and so forth. And then you want to have receipts for those expenditures in the club batch. And y'all are participating in the seminar today, so you're meeting the qualifications to receive a grant. One of the policies in the district is that each club who gets a grant should have someone trained to do it. And a little more complicated is the global grant process, which the training is a little bit more complicated, or a lot more complicated, and I'll let Terry explain that to you.
Thank you, Frank. Nicely done. Let's talk about global grants. Global grants are larger and more complex than district grants. The reasons for that will become obvious. And this is sort of like these stunt movies or these stunt shows on TV. Don't try this at home. A global grant has a lot of boxes to check. It has a lot of requirements. It would be very difficult for someone from a standing start to put together an approvable global grant. So we have a chairman, Ben Ficklin of the Fort Mill Club. Ben's been involved in our water projects going back almost a decade. He knows the ropes, and he knows the individuals at the foundation that help sort of shepherd these through. So do contact Ben if you have an interest in either initiating or participating in a global grant. Now, global grants all fall within the causes, the areas of former areas of focus, and those are the 6 causes that Frank listed, the tried and true plus the new environment cause. Now let's do some definitions here. A global grant by definition is across country boundaries. And there are 2 parties to that. There's the host club. The host club is the club in the country where the project will take place. Now, for most of our grants, we are the international partner club or the international partner district. And so we partner with a host club in another district in another country on global grants. And that's how we use those district designated funds, or those funds that come back to the district. Half of those are allocated to global grants, half of them are allocated to district grants. Now, we do most of our work in the Caribbean and in Central America. Those are, by and large, the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And one of the reasons we do that is because, first of all, there's not a lot of language barrier. And secondly, it's easy to get there. We can go there, and we want to be on the ground when one of these global grants is happening. That Ben Ficklin has made countless trips. Al Steele has been to Honduras over 35 times on his own nickel to supervise and to participate in global grants we've done in Honduras. And part of the magic of the foundation, I just want to emphasize this right here, and that is that you know that your money is being watched by a Rotarian on the other end. These grants don't move until a Rotarian in another country says, we've got a problem here. In the case of our work in Honduras, it's high infant mortality, high childhood mortality. They picked the village, and we know these folks. They are the leaders in their communities. For example, the Rotary Club of Copan. We know those folks. We sleep in their hotels. We eat in their restaurants. We drink coffee from their coffee plantations when we're down there. And they know us. We know each other by sight and by name. Now, there is such a thing as sometimes called a reverse global grant. And I would encourage you, if you have a big enough idea in your club, you can qualify for a global grant. There are gracious plenty high giving districts all over the world. Asia, Japan, India are all high giving Rotary districts, and they will cooperate with you on a global grant because they have the same kind of money to spend outside their country. So let's talk about the criteria for what would qualify as a global grant. These are projects of some term. These are projects of some duration. Unlike a district grant, which needs to be done within the club year, these can span 1 or 2 or 3 years. They do have to align with the causes, the former areas of focus. They need active participation by Rotarians, and particularly in the host club, somebody in the host club that says, I'll watch your back. The minimum budget is $30,000. When this grant model was created about a decade ago, the Rotary Foundation said, if we're going to do something, let's do something big. Let's do something of some sustainable and measurable outcome and some scale of something that matters. So when we do a water project, for example, we're talking about water projects that affect hundreds of families in a single village. And those cost somewhere between $35,000 and our largest one is a little bit over $100,000. It was 3 villages, all fed by the same huge water source. So we are making a serious difference in the lives of those folks. Now, international partnerships are required. There must be a home club, a host club. There must be an international partner club. There are considerable terms and conditions to global grants because we're talking about seriously 10 times the money. There's stepped up, shall we say, visibility and scrutiny of these grants. They do have to qualify. I'd like to tell you about a few projects we have done. I mentioned water projects in Honduras, and you may be aware that 750 million people, 750 million people around the world drink contaminated water every day. And as a result, mostly children die before they reach the age of majority, childhood mortality. And that happens in every underdeveloped country, every third world country. And in our case, like I said, we are working primarily in the Caribbean and Central America. We've done projects in Copan, Marcala, Olanchito, Honduras. I've actually visited projects in Guatemala, as well as Honduras myself. We've done community hospital projects, village health projects, and we did have a COVID response project. There's also, it didn't qualify, we didn't have time to get a grant together. The COVID response need was so great in the community of in and around Copan for just food that the Copan Rotarians reached out to us. Again, we know them, they know us, and said, could you as a district help us with some funding of simply a food project for families that due to a COVID lockdown are just not able to get to the store. And these are communities back in mountain villages, a couple of hours by 4-wheel drive off the paved road. And so we helped out with that basically just as a district. In Haiti, we've been in Haiti almost 20 years. This is a project that was invented by actually the wife of a District 7750 Rotarian. And we have done water projects, we have done education projects, we have taught Haitians to farm. And now we are creating a goat farm. A goat in an underdeveloped country, a goat is a wealth building mechanism. Goats provide meat, goats provide milk, and goats provide other goats. So we are setting up a gigantic goat breeding project. We're going to be running somewhere between 200 and 400 breeding goats to create kids literally year round. We give those to a family. We expect a kid back a year later to continue, keep this project going. But this will have huge impact on individual families. We've already taught them to farm. We've provided seeds and farming tools for them, hoes, rakes, shovels, etc. And now we're providing some protein. The Peace Fellows, those are some of the other things that fall into the category of global grants. A Peace Fellow is an expensive proposition. That's a worthy student attending one of our peace institutions around, mostly in the United States. Let's talk about these water projects. Our formula for a water project is somewhat unique. We go up above the village, up into the mountains. We find a mountain spring that runs year round. Now, of course, the villagers know where these are. We dam that up with cinder block, and then we pipe it down to the village. And what you see here actually is unusual. You'll notice this is screwed steel pipe. This is 4-inch steel pipe. And we only use that in a situation like what you see here, where we're going over rock. We'll go on the surface of the ground where we have to, but most of that conduction line, we call it, comes from the water source down to the village in PVC pipe that is, of course, buried. That requires digging trench, and that's part of what the villagers do. You'll notice every person in this shot is somebody from the village that will benefit from this project. Now, folks, we don't pay for any labor. We do pay for some project management, and we do pay for some technical services. But other than that, it's purely materials. So it's pipe, a lot of pipe, and brick and rebar and mortar in order to build a ground-based water tower, about 10,000 gallon water tank up on the side hill above the village. And of course, then we pipe down to the village using PVC, much the way we pipe a sprinkler system in South Carolina. And so there's actually a spigot or a tap at each of the homes in the village. Fresh water, just the way God made it. It came out of the rocks several hundred feet above the village. It was piped to the village over what could be a great distance. In some cases, these conduction lines are 7 kilometers. We're talking about almost 4 miles of trench that these villagers dig. Beth Padgett and I have both been involved in these meetings with these villagers where we ask them eyeball to eyeball, if we fund this project, who will show up to dig? All the men's hands go up. And of course, we ask them also to create a water board for their village, to collect a few pesos so that we have some money to do a little bit of chlorination. That's the only treatment that we do to this water. Apply a little chlorine so that it doesn't go bad while it's in the storage tank. So these are life-changing projects, and they have roughly a 40, perhaps even 50-year lifetime, because we're building a small municipal water system. And as a result, the folks in these shots all have children in this village. Those children will benefit from these projects, and that's why they're excited about them. Not only those children, but their grandchildren will probably grow up in that same village. We will touch literally 3 generations in each of these villages with these projects. Sustainability, you're talking about a project with a 40 or 50-year life, you can't ask for much more as far as sustainability is concerned. And you know, this is not trivial work. This is hard work and hardworking guys that show up to do it. The one thing I want you to remember about the Rotary Foundation. Now, the Rotary Foundation is my family's charity of choice. Our giving to the Rotary Foundation exceeds other charitable causes to which we give. And that's because I know who the people are on the other end that are watching our back. When we send $100,000 into Honduras, it doesn't just drop in the pocket of some contractor. It is administered by the Rotary Club of Copan, Marcala, or Olanchito, and they watch the project, they know the progress is being made, and they meter out those funds. Again, mostly for material. So nothing happens in the Rotary Foundation until a Rotarian says, I have a problem in my community. I have a solution for that, and I'm willing to lead a project to do it. The thing I need is some financial support. So what I've learned about this is that, and this has added some value to my Rotary experience and to our lives as a family. Pam and I have been on these projects in Haiti. We've been on these projects in Honduras, attended a district conference in Guatemala, and just this past year, actually spent 3 days in Africa, in Ghana, with Rotarians, took off work to drive us around and visit projects in Ghana, mostly school projects and water and sanitation projects. They have, of course, all the same issues in Ghana as we do in Central America. Unfortunately, we don't have mountain springs in Ghana. And so those are all drilled wells, what they call a borehole. That is the water source. And we drill those deep. We're not just going down into what could be a contaminated groundwater layer. Those things are 200, 300 feet deep, where we actually go down to an aquifer. So we know we have a water source for decades, not just short term. We do the same thing there. We build a water tower elevated above the level of the city or the village, where we're providing water systems. And then that's piped out to the individual homes. There's also a central sort of water station where people can come with their own containers and fill them up with water. Kind of an interesting thing at those filling stations. There's a tap at about waist high, chest high, and then there's a spigot up about 8 feet up in the air. That's because, of course, in Africa, most everything's carried on the head. So they show up with a 5-gallon bucket on top of their head, turn on the spigot, and fill it out of a tap that comes out of the water station about 8 feet off the ground. Quite remarkable. So we encourage you to work with our global grant leader, with Ben, to get additional information and grant funding that covers the minimum amount of the funding, that helps us implement larger grant projects. And of course, long-term sustainable impact is essential to these grants. So at this point, we have a little bit of time left. We'd be happy to answer your questions. Either hold down your space bar and just sing out, or you can put your questions in the chat box, and those questions will be moderated by Frank Cox.
Thank you, Terry. Anyone have any questions?
This is Marty Cotton with Clover Rotary. Is this presentation available to us to print, or can I have it emailed to me?
I'll be glad to.
Thank you.
This is Kathy McMillan from the Emmon Rotary.
Yes.
Going back to the spreadsheet where you showed the amounts that the clubs had contributed.
Yes,
If
ma'am.
if I have a question about that, I won't talk my business in front of everybody, but I question the amount for our club. Who do I talk to about that?
Talk to Lorraine.
Okay.
You have her
Those
information?
reports are readily available for your club.
Yeah.
We can show you to the penny what contributions were made and how those calculations were done.
Well, I'm the one that sends it in, and our club, each member is doing $100 per year to the foundation, but it's showing $97.23 per capita. So and that's going to impact the amount that we can apply for the grant. So I guess I'm not understanding that. So I need to talk to somebody and see why that is.
Check with
Lorraine will be
Lorraine.
able to help you with that.
Yeah, I have actually all of the contributions made for the year by, each contribution. So I can look at your club and see what happened there.
Okay, we'll talk later. Thank you, Lorraine.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. Any more? Well, if you would like a copy of the presentation, we'll be glad to send it to you. Just send me an email. I'm in DACDB. It's a simple email, fcox63.
Frank, how about if we post that on the district website, rotary7750.org?
We'll do that.
And just in the search box up at the top of rotary7750.org, just type grants. And this slide set, as well as everything else you need to know about district grants, will pop up on the page.
Thank you, Terry.
Okay, and thank you, Terry. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Lorraine, for an outstanding presentation this afternoon. A reminder that any of us, Lorraine, Frank, I will be willing to help you. If you have any questions, just let us know. Also, while we were having this session, an email, as I promised, landed in your box. If you have not registered yet for tomorrow night for the virtual foundation celebration. Please join us. It'll be about an hour. Outstanding speaker, Stephanie Urchik, and it'll be time well worth spent. So thank you so much for joining us today. An announcement that is also a very good bit of news. I was at the Greenwood Club yesterday doing my official governor's speech, and they were asked if the polio contributions, the match from the Doug and Sally Kaufman charity, would continue. And we found out that as of yesterday, we had met the $15,000 that Doug and Sally Kaufman had set aside for the polio match, a match of $100 or so. So by the end of the meeting, the Kaufmans had raised that to a $20,000 match. They have added $5,000 to the match. So the polio match will continue through November 15th. There's another $5,000 out there if you or anyone in your club who would like to contribute to the our Polio Plus effort as Rotarians. So thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow night, and let us know if you have any questions about district grants. Y'all have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.